This is a lot taller than the one we're used to. Actually, I've been sitting down most of the time lately, but I'm happy to report I'm feeling better finally. So yes. So welcome everyone. Our topic today is aligning with divine will. And the place I'd like to start is with a little bit of a story about my initial thoughts about divine will. Kind of takes me back to that place where I grew up. And it was an age of fathers knows best, if you all can relate with that. And that's kind of what's been coloring up till recently my perception of what divine will really is. So my father was an electrical engineer. You'd think he would know what he was doing, but he told me his will was, okay, so we've got this car, it's very cold, you need to keep the engine warm. What I want you to do is put a bare light bulb on top of the engine and cover it with a rug. So I followed my father's will, and sure enough, the whole garage almost went up in flames because the rug caught fire. So it's kind of hard if you have past experiences to be able to say to yourself, oh yeah, I'm going to trust somebody else's will. They're going to lead me in the right direction. Maybe not. So one of the things that I had to do to be able to get oriented to divine will was to get rid of that picture that I think some of us may have had in our heads, may still do, of the Sistine Chapel, with the God figure reaching out and touching the Michelangelo figure and giving life to everything. I mean, this whole notion of the guy with the beard up in the sky, et cetera, goes a little bit too closely to my faith in my human concept of what an old guy in the sky looks like and can do. And it doesn't give me a lot of confidence in trusting in whatever that's going to be deciding for me. So I had to kind of move away from that vision. Of course, we've all kind of moved away from that vision, I think, as time goes on. But the one that I have now that I'd like to share with you that really gives me a sense of peace about what this will of God is all about is the image that I use in my mind of iron filings on a sheet of paper. I don't know how many of you did this way back in science classes. It was a common thing to do when I was growing up. Hopefully, you've all had this experience where you shake the iron filings onto a sheet of paper, and then you put a magnet underneath it. And lo and behold, all of a sudden, without doing anything, without any visible force on all those little iron filings, they all line up into a beautiful pattern. And you can shake the paper and bingo, they all go back into place again. It's just this wonderful image of this amazing presence of order that is there. And the iron filings all respond to it. Every time you shake them up, they just get back in order again. I mean, it's just, you don't know it's there. You can't feel it. You can't see it. It's just this force that is there. So that gives me a lot more comfort when I think about the will of God as being this presence that just creates order and harmony in the world. So the question then is, okay, we know now that divine will is this presence that's in the world. It doesn't depend on a human version of wisdom, but is just there all the time. So why would you want to align with it? And if you did want to align with it, how would you do it? Well, let me just start with a couple of quotations here. Charles Fillmore has an interesting quotation about this. He says, "The truth is that divine mind rests in a perpetual Sabbath, and that which seems work is not work at all. When man becomes so at one with the Father mind as to feel it consciously, he also recognizes this eternal peace in which all things are accomplished. He then knows that he is not subject to any condition whatsoever. It is your privilege to be as free as the birds, the trees, and the flowers. They toil not, nor do they spin, but they are always obedient to the divine instinct within. And their every day is a Sabbath. They stand in no fear of an angry God, though they build a nest, spread a leaf, open a petal, on the first or on the seventh day. All days are holy to them. They live in a holy omnipresence, always doing the will of him who sent them, and it is our duty to do likewise. So that idea that the divine will is this infinite presence that is there all the time, everywhere, is something that I noticed in a meditation a couple of weeks ago from Neil Donald Walsh. He describes it this way: all of life is animated by a single fantastic energy, which is the essence of everything that is, including you. Isn't that amazing? Now, because this essence is who you are and what you are made of, it can obviously never leave you. Perhaps not so obviously, it can also be wonderfully helpful. It can bring you peace in moments of stress, strength in moments of weakness, courage in moments of fear, wisdom in moments of confusion, forgiveness in moments of anger, and love in all the moments of your life. So that's kind of what we're aiming at here. I think when we think we want to align with divine will, is aligning with this wonderful force that is a gift to us to bring us, really, as Unity says, health, joy, peace, harmony, prosperity, and other good that we cannot even visualize in our present state of consciousness. Now that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Health, joy, peace, harmony, prosperity, and all the other good we can't even visualize in our present state of consciousness. Well, what does that really look like? I mean, those are all really nice words, but I kind of like to be able to say, okay, I want to get a touch and a feel for what this really is. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share with you the story that's contained in this book by Michael Singer. It's called The Surrender Experiment. I don't know how many of you read this book. I don't know how many of you have read his other book. He wrote The Untethered Soul. Yeah. So this is the story of his journey and how he got to be where he ended up. And Surrender is a good title for it because it's a story of surrendering to, if you want to use old language, the will of God. What he uses is the flow of life, which is also a term that Eric Butterworth uses too. So we'll just kind of shift our terminology over and explore an example of what this looks like. So here's what he says at the beginning. A little hard to see up here, sorry. Okay, he says, the planets stay in order, tiny seeds grow into giant trees, weather patterns have kept forests across the globe watered for millions of years, and a single fertilized cell grows into a beautiful baby. We are not doing any of these things as conscious acts of will. They're all being done by the incomprehensible perfection of life itself. All these amazing events and countless more are being carried out by the forces of life that have been around for billions of years, the very same forces of life that we are consciously pitting our will against on a daily basis. If the natural unfolding of the process of life can create and take care of the entire universe, is it really reasonable for us to assume that nothing good will happen unless we force it to? That whole control issue that we all have, right? It is into this exploration of this question that this book is devoted. What would happen if we respected the flow of life and used our free will to participate in what's unfolding instead of fighting it? What would be the quality of life that unfolds? Would it just be random events with no order or meaning? Or would that same perfection of order and meaning that manifests in the rest of the universe manifest in everyday life around us? So that was the question. And that's what we're talking about today. So Michael Singer started out, he was a 22-year-old grad student studying economics, sitting on the couch one day with his brother-in-law. I don't know how many of you had this experience, but the conversation lagged. And he was sitting there and his mind was going along the lines of, oh my gosh, what should I say now? What can we talk about? You know, you've had experiences where you're with somebody, you don't know what to say. And he was doing this on his couch in the afternoon one day with his brother-in-law. And all of a sudden, he realized that there was a whole separate part of his mind who was watching him go through this process of trying to figure out what to say. A consciousness that was independent of his thoughts and his emotions around not knowing what to say. And that began his whole journey of realizing that there was another presence within him. It led him to going into Zen. It led him into reading Yogananda's, the famous book that I can't remember the title of right now, something about Autobiography of a Yogi. There we go. Thank you. And it led him to be so committed to wanting to explore more about this quiet other presence in his head that he took all of his savings that he had to go to graduate school, bought himself 5 acres and went out and lived on the land while still maintaining a minimal commitment to being a grad student. He went in and taught a class 3 days a week, but he was really deeply embedded in exploring and meditating and doing all this stuff. And after a while, of course, his academic advisor was a little concerned about this because he was wearing jeans and a shirt, his hair got long, he wasn't around much. So his advisor said to him, you know, I'd like you to tutor this fellow over here in economics. He's going to be the president of our community college. He doesn't have a PhD. He needs to pass some tests. I'd like you to tutor him. Well, as Michael Singer says it, this little voice, not the ego voice in his head, not the quiet one, but the ego voice said, oh, no. I don't want to do that. I don't want to take my time away from all of what I'm, but knowing that his wisdom was wiser than that, he said, yes. And so he did. He started tutoring this college president. Well, after the end of the tutoring, it came time to take qualifying exams to then go on and do your PhD, which of course, Michael Singer was supposed to take also. So they decided they'd sign up together, but there was one section of the curriculum that he hadn't studied at all. So he said, I don't want to sign up for that piece, just the 2 I know about. Well, he gets to the test. He gets his confirmation that he's going to be taking the tests. And lo and behold, there was a mistake made and he was signed up for 3. One section he had not studied at all and knew nothing about. Well, in the spirit of learning from his experiences, he said to himself, okay, this is obviously an opportunity for me to experience failure. I mean, you know, you got to go through these things, and I haven't had much of experience with failure, so that's what I'm anticipating. That's what's going to happen. But, you know, maybe I'll just take a little bit of a look at the textbook. So he took this big, thick textbook the night before the exam, randomly opened it, and read the 2 pages, randomly opened it again, read the 2 pages, randomly opened it a 3rd time, read the 2 pages, and that was it. Went into his test, sat down, got the pamphlet. There were 6 essay questions on the test. 3 of them were on the 3 sets of pages that he had opened up to randomly the night before. So what did he say about that in his mind? He said, oh, I think life is trying to lead me and give me things. I can trust this process. So he went on. His academic advisor again came to him and said, we need you to write a dissertation. You're supposed to be a grad student working toward a PhD. The last thing he wanted to do was to write a dissertation. He thought to himself, I don't want to spend my time writing a dissertation. But he said, okay. And he wrote his dissertation, which turned out to be The Search for Truth, which is the first book he ever wrote. Now, if he'd listened to that little monkey mind ego person in his head, he would never have done it, but he didn't. He went ahead and the universe helped to get him that ability to put that out there. So what does he say about all this? He says, you know, there's no reason for you to bring your past fears to the party. Just let the universe unfold. If you stop reacting to things, then you don't create any disturbances in this wonderful flow of the universe. If you let the dance of life pass through you, serenity, grace, and peace just pass through you. That is what's happening within, and that is what's happening that is God's will. You let go of you, and you only have God and your inner consciousness. And if you have a willingness to remain centered, all kinds of wonderful things will unfold. Well, his life certainly continued to unfold that way. He, in this class that he was, go back. The fellow he tutored ended up being the college president. He came out to him to see Michael and said, I'd like you to teach a class at my college. So Michael went in and for the interview, and here he is, hippie, long hair. This is the 70s, jeans, and I think it was barefoot actually too. And anyway, so they said, great, we want you to teach a class. What would you like to teach? And so he said, well, I think I'd like to teach what I'm experiencing, how to find about this inner part of myself. So they let him teach a class in that. One thing led to another. He had students coming out to his land to meditate with him. They decided, maybe we should build a building for that. So they built a temple to allow people to come and meditate with him on his land. And then one day he's walking outside, typical weekday, and he looks over at the temple and there's a police car parked outside the temple. And it's like, oh boy, now what? So he walks over and says, excuse me, can I help you? And the deputy says, hey, did you build this temple? And he said, well, yeah, I did. He said, I would like to have a house, and I love the way this temple is built. Would you build me a house? And so one thing led to another, and all of a sudden now he's got a construction firm because there are so many people who are wanting to come to him to use his skills in building carpentry and whatnot. Of course, when the deputy first said to him, would you build me a house? His little ego voice inside said, you don't want to be doing that. It's the last thing you want to do. But he didn't listen. He said, sure, I will build you a house. And one thing led to another. And then pretty soon he had a construction firm. He called his construction firm Built with Love. And it grew and grew and grew until finally one day he needed to get a construction loan. He had no resources, no nothing. And he went into the bank. And of course, what did he have to offer? Not much. But instead of just meeting with a loan officer, the person that met him at the bank took him upstairs to the president's office. And he sat down and the president interviewed him. And he said, I've been watching what you've been doing, and I have a great faith in you. I'm going to give you your construction loan on my say-so. And of course it worked and everything went fine. Just a little shortcut to the end of the story. 10 years later, Michael Singer went in on an odd random night to do something he never does. He went to go in and check out a video to watch in a video store. And he was looking around for the videos, and he looked over at the video store manager, and the manager kept staring at him and he wasn't quite sure why. And turns out the video store manager was the bank president who decided he didn't want to be in banking and was starting out his own business. He said to Michael, I'm so happy to see you again. And Michael said, wow, this is cool. And the guy said, the only problem I'm having is that I can't get any working capital to expand and really do what I want to do. So Michael said, tell you what, I'll make you a loan for $20,000, which was the amount that the bank president had given him initially. So these things come together, And so that's what happened. Another little incident, when he was off in Boston at one point, he had to stay overnight, wanted to go out and get some dinner, asked the person at the desk, where should he go? Where is there a nice vegetarian restaurant? Gave him directions, went out with his car, got lost 3 times, could not find the restaurant, finally decided, okay, I'm just going to park the car and walk and see if I can find something, because it was in the vicinity of Harvard Square, and you would think there would be a vegetarian restaurant somewhere in the vicinity of Harvard Square. So he parks his car, gets out, starts walking along the street, finally notices this little alley, kind of off in nowhere, goes down the little alley. There's a little signboard saying, brown rice and vegetables, special of the night. So he figures, aha, here's where I should go. Goes in, sits down, eats dinner, and notices that the guy behind the counter is staring at him the whole entire time. He's thinking, oh dear, why is this guy staring at me? Well, turns out the guy comes over. Michael Singer had given him a ride 10 years earlier in his van, had a picture of Yogananda sitting on his dashboard, and they'd had a conversation about Yogananda and meditation and whatnot, changed this guy's life. And he came over to say thank you for what had happened. Now, random stuff, what's the chances of walking into a restaurant in Boston and running into somebody that you had run into 10 years earlier? I mean, these are the kinds of things that start happening to him. But more importantly than all, not importantly, but all these little things, they were happening on the big scale too. He went into a Radio Shack one day and saw one of the very first computers that Radio Shack ever came out with. And he thought, oh, that's interesting. I think I'll just get one of those just to see what it's like. So he decided, oh, this is pretty cool. I'll bet I could do an accounting thing for our business for Build with Love on this computer. So he did. And he told the guys at Radio Shack, here's some printouts of this thing. Isn't this cool the way this works? And they said, would you be willing to do some programming for some of our other clients? And his little voice said, you don't want to be getting involved in that sort of thing. You got your own life to live. But he said, yes. And so pretty soon he was doing programming for other people. He built a whole new little company called Personalized Programming. After a little while, a couple of doctors came to his office and said, hey, could you build a billing program for us? And this led to what eventually became a a national company with billions of resources and tons of employees. Ended up in the final stages being WebMD. And all of this grew from just this random, saying yes to the universe and not listening to that little voice inside of him saying, you will be doing this. So yeah, that's where he ended up as a CEO of a major corporation, which he was still living in the same place on his land. He was still spending his mornings meditating and spending his evenings meditating, still wearing jeans, still wearing work shirts. All of it hadn't changed who he was and how he was living his life, but the universe was feeding him with all of this prosperity, and he ended up being the CEO of WebMD. Now, things didn't always go smoothly. There was a time when he discovered that his business was located on land that was not zoned to be a business, and he had to move it. And there wasn't anything nearby that he could do. And just about the same time, the local township that he lived in decided to locate a garbage pit right across the street from his property, which of course is not real conducive to nice meditation to have a garbage pit right across. Push comes to shove, all of this sorted itself out. The community decided not to put the garbage pit there. The land that had been sold for a garbage pit was up for sale. He was able to buy it, and guess what? It was zoned commercial. He could locate his new headquarters right there. So he kept getting these experiences of saying, when I think there's something coming that's happening to me, that's a negative thing, very often, all the time, if I just hang in there, it turns into a positive. And that's how he lived his life, all the way up till September of 2003. And in September of 2003, he went in to go to the office one day, and there was a police cars all over his new headquarters. There were 75 FBI agents swarming all over his business, and they confiscated 1.2 million emails, 1,500 boxes of documents, 830,000 computer files, and told him he was under investigation for embezzlement and fraud. Yeah. So where did this come from, right? So he's one would tend to react to that by saying, oh my gosh, what am I going to do next? Well, he didn't. He said, okay, let me just take a breath and know that this is an experience the universe is giving me to learn from. Even though I'm looking at the potential of being indicted and facing 10 to 15 years in prison. Well, it turns out that one of his employees, who was a high-level manager, actually had been embezzling from the firm. But his own people had already gotten wind of it and were getting onto it and were doing an investigation internally. That manager figured out that he had been discovered. And so he very cleverly went to the FBI and said, hey, have I got information for you? And he was a whistleblower in which he knew exactly what all the documents said, but he told a story that made it look like it was the executives who were the ones who were doing it and not him. Well, the FBI heard this story first from this manager, and they believed him. And so I was given the same set of papers. That's the conclusion that they came to. So that was in September of 2003. He had to resign from his being involved with the business at all. Now, if most of us, me in particular, if I were under investigation by the FBI facing 15 to 20, well, 10 to 15 years in prison and all this kind of stuff, I'd be a little upset. But he didn't get upset. He simply said, oh, okay, well, this is an opportunity for me to learn about how to deal with my fears. And by the by, I think I'll write a book. And that is when he wrote The Untethered Soul, was while he was being investigated by the FBI. He wrote The Untethered Soul. I mean, it's just, yeah. So this level of commitment to just going with the flow of life, he had intense trust in what that would do. Well, ultimately, and he was supposed to go to trial in September of 2009, 6 years of having to live under this thing. 4 weeks before the trial was due to start, all of the charges were dismissed because they were groundless. There was no shred of proof in there that he had done anything at all. So that's a fascinating story to me of a modern day example of what happens when we allow ourselves to align our will with the flow of life. Letting go of reactive energies is what it takes to remain conscious of what it is that's happening to us in every moment. The thing that he kept coming back to, now, first off, we have to remember that he was meditating a lot. I mean, I know every time someone gets up here, we always say, okay, and what is it you can do to have these wonderful things happen in your life? And the first thing we always say is meditate. Well, yes, we're saying it again. If you want to be able to align with this kind of flow of life, you do need to meditate. And of course, he was doing a lot of that. But he's got some other suggestions as well. He said, what you need to do is let go of the reactive energies you have within you. To keep your consciousness centered. Interestingly, he said reacting, which is what we tend to do a lot, he said is not natural or spontaneous in the sense that you think that, oh, this reaction is just coming out of nowhere. Most of our reactions come from everything that's been pre-programmed in us by everything that's happened to us up to this moment in our lives. We get stuck in these routines of fears and things that are all stuff that we carry with us. And so we think, oh, I'm reacting to this spider naturally, but no, I'm reacting to this spider because way back when I did not develop a nice, friendly relationship with spiders. I could have, but I didn't. So I'm actually pre-programmed to go when I see a spider. There's no reason to do that, but that's my programming. So that's what we tend to do when we don't look at and go behind and say, hey, wait a minute. No, wait. All of this stuff is pre-programmed. I don't have to follow that. If we can be present between the action out there and our reaction in here, we can access the fact that, oh, wait, we don't have to respond the way we've been programmed to respond. It keeps you into the patterns of your karmic stuff if you can't interrupt that process. And that's where will comes in. Will comes in and being able to say, wait, I'm going to stop and interrupt this process and start watching to see what I'm doing inside. What does it feel like? What is it? What thoughts are coming to mind? And just be an observing of what that is. He says the beginning of spirituality is in your self-will and the discipline to not just go with your reactions. So, what is it that we can do? He has a 6-step process that describes how we move from where we start out to being able to be in a deep state of alignment all the time. And the first step is, as I just mentioned, observing what's happening on the outside, but not letting yourself react from what's inside. So stopping your outward action when something happens and just not immediately responding or reacting, but just stopping for a second and saying, oh, okay, I'm not going to do this outward action. He says the second step is that our mind then will find all kinds of explanations as to why it's perfectly fine that we don't take that step. He calls it rationalization, but it's all still in our mind. Like we say, okay, so I'm not going to scream because I saw that spider, because it's a pretty standard stereotype that we're supposed to be afraid of spiders. And I don't like that stereotype, so I'm not going to comply with that stereotype. My whole mind goes into this whole routine about why I'm not going to scream when I saw that spider. But I'm still just in my mind, and I'm still really manipulating things so that I can feel okay about not screaming, having seen that spider. But that's not quite the level that we want to get to. So the next level then is to just let go of both the fact that there's a spider and the fact that I want to scream about it, and just let go of the whole thing. And don't let your mind get caught up in all these rationalizations as to why you're not going to take the action that you otherwise would have taken. The next step is to go even deeper, to go into your heart and ask yourself, okay, so what's the emotion underneath all of this? What is it that is in my heart about this situation? And this is the one where it gets to be really tricky, because when you start dealing with emotions in your heart, that's where all of your reactive energy comes from. And it can make you feel really insecure and afraid when you start dealing with these energies. I'm thinking that in unity language, this is the stage at which perhaps we start manifesting things that we may not have known we had before. So we may get sick, we may do things of that sort. The next step, then he said, is to then, having witnessed what those emotions are, to go past that and just be that person who's observing. Be that person inside who is observing all of the emotions, all of the actions, all of this stuff that's going on, all of your thoughts about it, and just letting it be there. He didn't say this, but I kind of like to think of it as if you have a little 3-year-old inside of you who's doing all of this stuff, and you can just observe and love that little 3-year-old, but know that you don't want that 3-year-old determining what you're going to do. You're just going to love that little 3-year-old. And then in the very last stage, you get into a deep state where you are in that place of peaceful consciousness all the time. And whatever else goes around you doesn't have any impact on you, because you're always responding from that place of peace. And you just let the energies of the world flow through you. Well, let me just read to you in his own words what he said about this whole experience here. Just a minute. The legal ordeal quickly became a distant memory, almost a dream. It had come and gone just like everything else. I could clearly see that because I had inwardly surrendered each step of the way, no scars were left on my psyche. It had been like riding on water. The impressions only lasted while the events were actually taking place. Yet in the moment of actual experience, each twist and turn had reached deep inside me and forced me past foundational fears and personal boundaries. As long as I was willing to accept the purification power of life's flow, I kept coming out on the other side a transformed person. How could I consider this a bad experience when it created such beauty and freedom within me? To the contrary, I stand in awe of all that happened since I started this amazing experiment of acceptance and surrender. Well, I go back to where I started. Unity says that when you align yourself with the will of God, that you will experience health, joy, peace, harmony, prosperity, and other good we cannot even visualize in our present state of consciousness. That is Michael Singer. He never visualized any of what happened to him, and he ended up having this amazing and very, very fruitful life. So it comes back around then to this question of free will. Humans have free will. It would be pointless to have will if it wasn't free. I mean, you might as well get rid of the term if you don't have free will. If you have unfree will, you have no will at all. You're just being told what to do. So we do have free will. We have a choice as to what it is we're going to do. A lot of times we struggle with, well, why is this happening to me, or why is this happening in the larger world? So why did Michael Singer's corporation have a manager who ended up perpetrating fraud? That's something that just happens by that particular person's free will deciding to do something that is not within the flow of life. But then I think about Michael Singer, and what happened to him as a result of that is he stayed in the flow of life, and that whole experience ended up blessing him. That to me is a wonderful answer to the question of all the terrible things in the world and free will. Where does it come from, and what can we do about it? So just in closing, I just want to talk about the concept of chemicalization. Chemicalization is that idea that when we start to heal, all the stuff that we need to heal starts to come to the surface. I think maybe that's what our country is going through right now, is the process of chemicalization of our group consciousness. And I think that those steps that Michael Singer outlined apply to our entire nation as well as our entire world. So what is it we can do? We can go within and have the courage to go on past our comfort zone. He said that it is our willingness to put our spiritual growth ahead of our internal comfort that is what our will needs to decide to go for in order to move ourselves forward, to begin and strengthen our spiritual transformation, to aligning with the universe and with life. So let me just end with final comment that he makes here. People often ask me how I look at things now that I've gone through the life-changing experiences of these last 40 years. I tell them to read The Untethered Soul. How could I possibly explain the great freedom that comes from realizing to the depth of your being that life knows what it's doing? Only direct experience can take you there. At some point, there's no more struggle, just the deep peace that comes from surrendering to a perfection that is beyond your comprehension. Eventually, even the mind stops resisting, and the heart loses its tendency to close. The joy, excitement, and freedom are simply too beautiful to give up. Once you are ready to let go of yourself, life becomes your friend, your teacher. When life becomes your way, all the noise stops, and there is great peace. So let's take a moment to go into that great peace right now. If everyone can settle in, take a breath, allow yourself to just rest for a moment, turning within, allowing for all of your human concerns to just drift into the background for a moment, and to let yourself just come to that inner place of peace and stillness. This inner place of peace where we remember that we are spiritual beings. This inner place of peace where we align ourselves with the infinite flow of life. We know that we are that energy. We are that energy of life and love. We are that energy that is the foundation of everything, everywhere. And all of that energy is unfolding in harmony, in grace. We allow ourselves to remember that we can trust that flow, that we can allow ourselves to use the guidance that comes from this place inside of quietness, that we can lovingly watch our ego self, but not let it be in control of who we are and what we do. for we are spiritual beings, blessed to be in this flow of divine life. We are created with this connection within, and nothing can ever take that connection away. And so we say to Spirit, thank you. We are grateful. Grateful for the infinite harmony and flow of life that is God's will. Grateful to know that we are connected and part of that flow. And all is well. Amen. So I invite you to return back to this room. We'll sing our song and then form our circle. And let's move slowly. I don't know if the rest of you are as warm and hot as I am, but it's pretty warm in here. So we'll just kind of do this gently. Okay. Prayer protection. That's what we do first. I'm sorry, of course. Prayer of protection, which is right there behind me. And it's also right here in front of me. Hang on a second. Okay. Yes, this is an affirmation of the flow of life within us. So here we go. The light of God surrounds us. We are the light. The love of God enfolds us. We are the love. The power of God protects us. We are the power. The presence of God watches over us. We are the presence. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. We are one. Okay, let's form our circle and sing the peace song.